There's no better way to end this day, which started with a bit of some tragic news. Everyone heard the news from Israel, and we need a bit of nechama. Nechama comes from Hamakom Yenachem Etchem from Hashem, right? So the Rambam writes that when we meet with Talmidei Chachamim, it's like meeting with the Shekhinah. So we have the amazing opportunity to have shiur from Rabbi Goldberg, B'ezrat Hashem. We've had a few big rabbis come in, Bnei Akiva, Baruch Hashem, over the last few years. It's always been amazing. B'ezrat Hashem, it will be amazing also. And also give us some Torah, some nechama, some chizuk. So B'ezrat Hashem, Rabbi Goldberg, Toda Rabba.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity, Rabbi Yeshakach, all your work and Bnei Akiva, the beautiful community and the work and the connection to Am Yisrael, to Eretz Yisrael, and to everything that's going on. So I wanted to speak together, I wanted to learn together a little bit of a different angle or perspective on a familiar topic. And the familiar topic is Nosei Ba'olam Chavero. The idea that fundamental to good Jewish character, good Jewish practice, to who we are, is to feel not only sympathy, but to feel empathy. What's the difference between sympathy and empathy? Sympathy, Brene Brown has a fantastic little sort of illustration of this in a cartoon that she produced. If you picture that there's a ditch, a hole in the ground, it's dark, it's damp, it's cold, and somebody's stuck, they're sitting low to the ground, they're depressed, they're out of it. And sympathy is that somebody walking looks down the hole, sees the person sitting down there and says, wow, it looks cold, it looks uncomfortable. I'm so sorry, I'm thinking about you. That's sympathy. To see someone struggling, to see someone suffering, to express care and concern about them is sympathy. Empathy is to climb down a ladder, to sit in the hole, to sit next to the person, and to say, I feel your pain. I'm in this with you. I'm here in this circumstance. I'm here in this moment. Chazal, our rabbis tell us that one of the ways that Torah is acquired, one of the 48 ways that Torah is acquired, is through this character trait of Nosei Ba'olam Chavero, is to lift the burden, the ol of Chavero. When someone's suffering, when someone's struggling, when someone's having a hard time, to not just show them sympathy. Sympathy is if someone were to walk in this room right now carrying a heavy suitcase, carrying a heavy box, and you'd say, wow, that looks pretty heavy, but you'd still sit in your seat. You just look at them and say, I feel so bad for you. It looks pretty heavy. To be Nosei Ba'olam Chavero is to literally lift the burden, is to run over and say, give me the other end of the box. What happens when you run over and grab the other end of the box? What happens for the other person? The box gets lighter. It feels lighter. It feels more manageable. It feels like something that they can carry. To be Nosei Ba'olam Chavero is to carry the burden with a friend, so it becomes something manageable. It becomes something that they can carry. It's one of the 48 ways Torah is acquired. It's something Chazal emphasize in so many different ways as a core midah. Hagar, for example, lacked it when Yishmael was expelled from the home, and Hagar sees what he's going through. So Hagar says, I can't bear to watch, I have to look away. That's the opposite of Nosei Ba'olam Chavero. A Yiddish mother, a Jewish mother would never look away. She can't stop staring at. In fact, the pasuk tells us that when Moshe is floating in the basket, none of this is in the source sheets yet. I'm going to get to that. When Moshe is floating in the basket, it says, Nar boche, nar boche. Who is this nar that's crying? Rashi says it's Moshe. And it was the voice of a mature, developed person, but it was Moshe who was crying. That's why Moshe, even though he's a baby, is already called a nar. But the Baal HaTurim says that it wasn't Moshe who was crying. Nar boche, who was crying? Aaron. To be Nosei Ba'olam Chavero means a brother doesn't move on, a brother doesn't look away, a brother can't stop watching. As the rabbi said, this was a very difficult day, as too many have been since October 7th for Am Yisrael. And for us, we don't look away. We don't say, I'm not checking the news. It's too depressing. It's too sad. It's too hard. We say, I can't stop checking the news. I can't stop connecting. I can't stop showing love and care and concern and feeling empathy, the pain of other people, to feel that pain together with them. Moshe Rabbeinu is recruited by Hashem to be what will become the quintessential paradigmatic leader of Klal Yisrael. He's Rabbeinu in perpetuity. He's forever our teacher. Why? Why was Moshe chosen? He's the smartest. He davens in the most kavana. He's got the best midos, the greatest character. What was it about Moshe that made him chosen? He has a speech impediment. He's not even articulate. He's the person who should be the spokesperson going to power, demanding, let my people go. Why was Moshe chosen? So the Torah says that when Moshe stops to look at the burning bush, it says, Kisar lir'os. He turned to see. And Chazal, the Medrash says, Kisar lir'os besivlosam. He had left the palace to go see the pain of his brothers. He had every ability to retreat into the comfort and protection of the palace. He had every ability to say, this doesn't apply to me. I'm well and good. I'm good to go. But he didn't. He stopped. He left the palace. He went to go see and to watch. He went to go look and to intervene and to help. He was nosei b'olam chavero. He cared. He cared enough to make a difference. And that made him, the author of Kelm said, that's what made Hashem recruit and solicit him. That's what made him the leader of the Jewish people. Hashem himself is nosei b'ol. Hashem himself is imo anachi b'tzara. In what kind of a bush, what kind of landscape does Hashem appear to Moshe in? He doesn't appear in a bed of roses. When he appears to Moshe, how does he appear in a thorn bush? A lowly thorn bush. And Rashi says, why? Imo anochi b'tzara. Because I am in pain with you and I feel your pain. So all of that is a long-winded way of introducing the topic of nosei b'olam chavero. The way we normally think about nosei b'olam chavero is, you see someone suffering, you see someone struggling, and certainly this is our mission and our role, all of Am Yisrael, over the last 15, 16 months, and please God, it should end immediately. Our hostages should come home and our soldiers should be safe, should have a sweeping triumph and victory over our enemies, and even then the work will just be beginning to be nosei b'ol, to feel the pain of those with PTSD, of those who are recovering from the trauma of what has been this war. That's who we are, that's what we're made of, nosei b'olam chavero, to see pain and to help it. And I was thinking, this stage of life, certainly we still have people who are struggling, who are challenged in school, God forbid with health of family members, in shidduchim, wanting to get married, parnasa, looking for a job. And our mission, if we want to be molded and shaped by Torah, to be the Torah personalities we're meant to be, it's not just to feel sympathy from afar, but it's to feel empathy from up close. It's to feel the pain. It's to communicate that I'm with you. I'm with you. I feel your pain, and I'm suffering with you. But I really wanted to speak about a different topic. And that's nosei b'olam chavero in a very different direction, and one in which I hope much more applies to you. And it's an unusual form of a nosei b'olam chavero, one that is different than you would think. The Sifsei Chaim. Now you can look at the source sheets if you want. In source number 3, I don't know what happened to source number 2. Ooh. Actually, you have an extra source book? Does that come right there? Thank you. The Sifsei Chaim, Rav Chaim Friedlander, who was a mashgiach of Panovich Yeshiva, he writes the following: "Nimtzei l'meidim ki malas nosei b'ol ina rak mala elyon b'chesed, el hi mala yesodis b'chol kolchos hanefesh ha'adam hakoladas b'socha malas rabos." He says we find that this ability to identify with and to feel empathy for is not just a aspirational quality in the world of chesed, but it is a high-level fundamental strength of a person that includes within it many other milos. It is the prerequisite. If you want to be a person who can show leadership, and you're part of Bnei Akiva, it's cultivating leadership. If you want to emerge with leadership in Am Yisrael in the world, if you want to be merit prophecy, if you want to be a person of Torah, then you need to be a feeling person. You need to be an empathetic person. You need to be a caring person. And we see that Gedolei Yisrael were extraordinary in this Maila. When they would be told the challenges that people are going through, they would react as if this was their pain. If you ever had the merit to get a bracha, to spend time, to daven, to be exposed to great people, you see that when they hear and when they learn about those who are having challenges, it's not just another name, it's not just another tefillah. They absorb it, they imbibe it, they feel it, they connect with it. That's this Maila. So their advice is good, because their advice is not just about another, it's not about a stranger, but they're identifying with the pain of the person. So the advice they're offering is really advice about themselves, about an extension of themselves. But skip to the second paragraph, because this is a topic I really want to talk to you about this evening. This notion of the capacity to feel connected with another person and to absorb and live what they're going through is not only true in the negative, it's not only true when a person is going through a challenge. Just like you feel the pain of another person as if it's your own pain, Umargish kilu hi simchaso ha'ishis. To be nosei ba'ol doesn't just mean to be able to connect with someone's pain. It also means to be able to connect with someone's joy, to be able to connect with someone's happiness, to be able to feel happy for somebody else. Adam ha'mishtatef b'chasnas chavero eino osazakar b'lashu izminoso. So, what age? What's the average age here? 21, 22. Okay, maybe it's early, maybe people are beginning. Okay, well, I'm an exception. Well, there are a few exceptions. We're bringing the age up a little bit. But the average age is relatively young. Maybe you've not yet begun dating in the world of shidduchim. But let's say you are. Let's say you're entertaining and you're trying to meet people and you're going out on first dates and you're making first phone calls and you're looking into references and you're in the world of shidduchim. And it's going well, it's not going so well. You're dating, you're not dating, there's dry spells. And you hear that your friend got engaged. How do you feel about it? Let's say you're going for a position in Bnei Akiva, a position in business. You're applying to get into a school. And you don't get in, you don't get the job. You don't get the appointment. And you find out your friend did. How do you feel? How do you feel about them? How do you feel about what's happened to them? Do we have the capacity to not only share in the pain of someone else when they're going through pain, but the capacity to share in their joy and their pleasure and their happiness when something is working out well, when something's working out right? So a person who joins in the wedding of their friend is not just doing it because you're invited. The highest level is to dance at your friend's simcha, not just because you were invited and you're doing it for him, but my friend is getting married. I'm so happy. This is my joy. This is my happiness. This is a part of my simcha, as if it's a member of my family. It's not so simple. And this is very high level, and it's very difficult to achieve because the reality is, the bottom line is, we have a strong sense of self, a strong sense of I. And our sense of self is separate and apart and independent of the people around us. So they got in, that's their success. They got married, that's their simcha. What does that have to do with me? But a person who's really learning to grow in this quality, which is so critical and core to acquire Torah, to be nosei ba'ol doesn't just mean to feel the pain of somebody else. To be nosei ba'ol means the capacity to share in the pleasure, the capacity to share in the joy. There's a word in Yiddish. I don't know how many people come to Bnei Akiva to teach Yiddish, but source number 4 on page 3. So there's an article that traces the origins of this word. But there's a word in Yiddish, which is to fargin. It's adapted. Okay, it's good for Bnei Akiva because it was adopted and adapted into modern Hebrew. Lefargin. What does that word mean? It doesn't appear in English, not in the funny English that you speak or the normal English that I speak. It doesn't appear. And what's that word? Lefargin, to fargin somebody is to be happy for them. To be happy for them, to share in their joy, to be happy for them. You hear that they had good news and you're happy for them. And you don't interpret their good news based on how it impacts you. The author of Kelm writes, he says it's easier to feel, to be nosei ba'ol, in tsar chavero. It's much easier to identify with and feel empathy for the pain of your friend than to identify with and feel that joy for your friend. Why? Which one do you think is harder? Now that I gave it away. Which one do you think is harder? Which one's easier? To be happy for a friend or to share in the sadness and the struggle with a friend?
The struggle? No, I mean the happiness.
The happiness. Why is that easier?
Easier or harder, I say?
Either one, whichever you want to answer.
Well, happiness is harder because, as the Rav said, you want it for yourself as much as the other person has it. But for the tsar, since you don't want it on you, it's easier to connect because, like, it's not impacting you.
Exactly. What's your name?
Jacob.
Jacob. That's what the author of Kelm says. He says when your friend's going through a hard time, you say, well, thank God it's not me. I'm happy to help him as long as it's not me. When your friend's going through a happy time, a successful time, you say, well, why him, not me? Why her, not me? I deserve it. I'm a much better person. I'm much greater merit. Why'd they have that? I deserve that. So it's harder. We think of it as being easier. We don't even think of this quality in this realm. But the truth is, says the author of Kelm, it's harder. In Yiddish, this twice exiled phrase is all about actually begrudging. But that's not how I understood it. Term in Israel home. You could read this article yourself. But lefargain, to fargin somebody, is to be happy, to be joyous, to share in their success, to share in their happiness. And we see this among our greatest people. Orchos Musar say in source number 5. Zeu sod gedulasa shel Moshe Rabbeinu Amala shel Nosei b'olam chadero, mikan gadol, mikan samach, mikan olav v'nisal lios, mikabel Torah v'ran shel Yisrael, zonami merumez v'krav v'yigdal Moshe. So Moshe excels in this way. The author of Kelm, as I said, describes that this is the reason Moshe was recruited to be the leader of the Jewish people. And he quotes a medrash. Moshe is a shepherd in Midian. He's watching after this flock of sheep. And he hasn't emerged to be this brilliant scholar yet. He's just a simple shepherd. But one of the little sheep that crawls away, it's hungry, it's thirsty, it's tired, it's down by the stream, it's trying to lap up some water. And Moshe goes and he notices that one is veered off the path. One is not with the herd. And others would have been oblivious. But Moshe notices, and he goes and he finds that little sheep. And the Medrash describes that Moshe puts the sheep on his shoulders, and he carries the sheep, and he loves the sheep, and he cares for the sheep. And Hashem says, "You're my man. You're the one. You're the one who I want to put in charge." So the pasuk says, "Vayigdal Moshe." When Moshe becomes a gadol, and he leaves the palace, Vayar b'sev l'sam. Mehechan gadol, me'ayin hitzaleh, me'vayitzer rachav, Vayar b'sev l'sam. What made him grow? What was this catalyst that made him mature? Was the fact that he saw the pain of another. But he says, till now we've dealt with what it means to feel the pain of another. But there's another level of nosei bo'ol, to fargin another, the fargain, to share the joy, to work on ourselves so that when we hear our friend got that job that we were going for, our friend got married, even though we've been dating longer, our friend had a child, even though we've been desperately waiting, that we don't interpret their event relative to us, but that we have that capacity to feel joy with them. It's an even higher level. It's a higher level. And you see this, he quotes it on the bottom. You're not allowed to stand in your friend in your friend's field when it's blossoming. Rashi says, because if you look and say, why him, not me? Why is he prospering, not me? You'll give it an ayin hara. Klamar. Adam Aval lo b'simchaso ula mishum madrigas malach shesameach b'simchas azulas ein lachos. Why are you not allowed to stand in your friend's field when it's blossoming? Because you might give it an ayin hara by looking at it with jealousy. When you're just an Adam, when you're giving into your nature, when you're a simple person. But if you could rise to the level of being a malach, but if somebody could be at a higher level, then in fact you're allowed to stand in the field because we're not afraid of ayin hara. You're going to share in the joy of your friend. You see this, he says, he quotes from the Kasher Glover. Kasher Glover was Rabbi Aryeh Tzvi Frimer, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin, of the Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin, the Yeshiva that Rabbi Meir Shapiro founded. We have a prohibition, the 10th of the 10 Commandments, the end of Aseret Divros, is lo sachmod. Lo sachmod. Don't covet, don't be jealous, don't crave what your friend has. The Mefarshim say, how can we control what we're jealous of? How can you control what you crave and what you want? That's an emotion. Torah can command, the Torah can legislate actions. Torah can say, put on tefillin, or light candles, or don't do the 39 malachas on Shabbos. But how can the Torah tell us how to feel? Don't crave, don't be jealous, don't be envious, don't want. And the Ibn Ezra has a famous answer with this, Alevi. But the Kasher Glover quotes different. He says, B'chol adam eskana chutz mibeno chadero, v'talmido. The Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us, we can be jealous of everybody, but nobody is jealous of their son, their child, and nobody is jealous of their student. A parent isn't jealous of their child. If your child comes home with a good grade, if your child makes more money than you, if your child learns better than you do, if your child is more talented in whatever area, a healthy parent is not jealous. A healthy parent is not competing. Why is a parent never jealous or competing with their child? Why do you think?
It's part of themselves.
Because the child is an extension of you. The child is literally your flesh and blood, your DNA. So that child is not the other. The child is not a stranger. The child is not competing. The child is you. It's an extension of you. The truth is, in a healthy marriage, it's the same. In a healthy marriage, both parties take pride in each other as an extension of one another. Ne'ezer kenegdo. They're together. They're one and the same. So a person, and the same is true of the Rebbe, a healthy Rebbe is never competing with his students. A healthy teacher is proud. The student's success is an extension of their own. And therefore, there's no room for jealousy. And so the Torah tells us, love everyone as ourselves. So that means that my friends are also an extension of me. A real chevra, a real friend, is an extension of who I am. And their success doesn't take away from mine. It doesn't compete with me. There's that capacity. So when a person gets to the level of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, then lo sachmod. Lo sachmod is not a rule telling us not to be jealous or covet or crave, because how can we control our emotions? The chiddush of the kosher lover is that Sachman is telling us, love your friends so much, be so close, that they're like your child, they're like your student, they're your flesh and blood, that you're able to share in their joy and you're able to share in their happiness. We see this example in Moshe and Aaron. Source number 6, the pasuk in Tehillim tells us, in Kapitel Kuf Lamed Gimel, Kashem and Atov Rosh Yered al Zakan Aaron, Shered al Pi Midosav. It's like fine oil on the head running down to the beard of Aaron, that comes down over the collar of his robe. The anointing, it's talking about the anointing of Aaron. And the Medrash Shir Shirim Rabbis, source number 7, wonders, why does the pasuk repeat itself? Like the fine oil on the head of Aaron that descends on his beard, al Zakan Aaron. Why the redundancy? Why the repetitiveness? Why do we say it twice? Says the Medrash, Ela kach amar kadosh baruch hu Moshe. Moshe, keshem shemor yalecha kach yemorach alachicha alachecha. V'hu lo asa kein. Ela vayelech Moshe v'Aaron v'yasvu es kozik nivei Yisrael v'yidaber Aaron's kol dvarim. Hikish ksefo l'ksefo sh'adayin ha'samech zeh b'gdulas sh'ozeh v'zeh b'gdulas sh'ozeh. U'minayin sh'aya Aaron samech b'gdulas Moshe shenemar v'inei gam hu yotzeh l'kros chalav v'rachem v'samach b'libo. And you see leiv sh'samach b'gdulas Moshe achid yilba sh'grim etumim. And then it was reciprocated. Minayin shaya Moshe samech b'gdulas Aaron kashem atov arosh sheyored al zakan Aaron. It says the Medrash. You know what you see from here? Moshe and Aaron are incredible siblings. They're amazing brothers. Why? They don't compete. Aaron's older than Moshe. You know what it must have been like for Aaron that his younger brother was appointed over him? I don't know. Aaron was going for the job, hoping for the job, not hoping for the job. But he reported to his brother. He was the assistant to his brother. His brother was over him. For lesser people, the sibling rivalry that would have ensued, the jealousy, the tension that would have happened. And you could say the same in the opposite direction. Moshe did apply for the job. He wanted to be a Kohen, but he wasn't given that distinction. His brother Aaron was. Moshe must have said to himself, God, if you love me so much, so why didn't I get the job I want? Why can't I be a Kohen? But he didn't feel that. Moshe was so proud of and happy for Aaron, and Aaron was so proud of and happy for Moshe. The pasuk says 2 beards because when the oil anointed the beard of Aaron, it was like it was on the beard of Moshe. And Moshe's success and happiness was felt and seen all over Aaron. Unlike our parashiyos we're reading right now, that are characterized by terrible sibling rivalry and tension and competitiveness and infighting, Moshe and Aaron had this incredible joy, had this incredible happiness. How? By seeing themselves as brothers, by being an extension one of the others. This stage of life that you're in and you're going into, and the truth is in every stage of life, this is a midah that doesn't come naturally. And unless a person mindfully and consciously and intentionally is working on it, it's not easy. Someone close to you, even a friend, has good news. Someone you're competing with or competing over a certain position or job, or both are at a stage of life that you're trying to achieve, getting married, having children, getting into school, getting a job. Do we have this capacity? Because it's harder, said the author. It's easy when you see someone suffering to say, let me jump in and help. Let me feel their pain. I'm just so happy it's not me or my family. But when you see someone succeeding, the ability to be happy for them, this is the definition of success. This is the character that we're striving for and that we're looking for. You know who didn't have it? The whole source of the story of Korach. The whole rebelliousness of Korach, and Korach fights back, is because he's jealous of Moshe. Why not me? I'm from the same family. I'm from the same lineage. I should have it. I should have it. So what Moshe and Aaron display for each other, their cousin Korach fails to do. And it eats them up inside because they're unable to be happy for somebody else. So what happens? When you're jealous of someone and you're not happy for them, your misery doesn't take away their happiness. It just makes you miserable. So you might as well be happy for them because then you're both happy as an extension of each other. That's again, Rav Mendel Weinbach explains, what does it mean when an Israeli says lefargein? Source 10. Literally translated into English, it means to not begrudge the success or well-being of someone else. This is an adaptation of the Yiddish word fargin, which is a positive way of expressing the satisfaction one can feel with another's happiness. The tragedy of Korach and his company sinking alive into the earth, which we'll be reading when he wrote this, all began with the extremely wealthy and important individual could not fargin the position given to someone else that he felt was coming to him. This envy led him to challenge the authority of Moshe and brought about his disaster. Not only is there really no word in modern Hebrew to pronounce fargin, there is also a lack of this attitude in much of our society. In politics and business, there's too much of a dog-eat-dog approach in dealing with others. It's a very unhealthy condition for any society, especially a Jewish one. There's a word, is it in German? What's the word when you take joy in the failure of another?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. It's a German word, right? It's a German word. How do you say that in Hebrew? To take joy and happiness in someone else's failure? You're all right. There is no word in Hebrew for that because we don't believe in that. There is no word, there is no emotion, and there is no feeling. We don't ever take joy in someone else's failure. I'm not encouraging you to watch it, but you can, fail compilations. People falling off skateboards and running into walls and failing at whatever they're attempting to do. Getting entertainment, being entertained, finding joy in other people's fails and flops is not a Jewish character trait. We don't have a word for Schadenfreude. And the rest of the world doesn't have a word of fargin. We have a word to describe sharing in the joy of another. We have no word for being happy in the failure of another. The rest of the world has a word for the failure of another and not a word in the joy of another.
They're both German.
What?
They're both German.
Fargin is Yiddish also, but we've adapted the fargin, so we have it in Hebrew too. We've adapted it into Hebrew. But we've not adapted the Schadenfreude into Hebrew as far as I know. So how do we achieve this? How do we get to this level? How can we feel this? Because again, it takes preparation. You have to get your mind there. You have to be ready for it when it's going to come. And throughout life, hearing the good news of other people. Someone else's post went more viral. They have more followers online. They drive a nicer car. They took a better vacation. Whatever it is we want in life, whatever we're striving for ourselves, when we see other people have it, how will it make us feel? Can we not only be nosei ba'ol b'tzar in chavero, can we be nosei ba'ol b'simcha? B'simchas chavero. So I want to suggest to you, based on a beautiful teaching of the Presidency Rebbe, Hashem Yikom Damo, in his Tzav V'Ziras, intellectual biography, or diary, rather, in his Tzav V'Ziras, he has the following entry. He quotes this idea about bittul, about nullifying our sense of self, our sense of anochi. What gets in the way? What often sabotages our success and our happiness? You know what is our enemy? Ego. Ego is the enemy. There's a book by that name. Ego is the enemy. Ego destroys relationships. Ego destroys happiness. Ego destroys health. Ego destroys business deals and opportunities. Ego is the enemy. Ego gets in the way. And that's alluded to. You can read it in the English. The pasuk says, Anochi Omeid Beini Uveinecha. The pasuk that's talking about when Moshe stood between Hashem and the Jewish people as the intermediary communicating the Torah after we panicked after the first two Dibros. The Baal Shem Tov explained this to mean that the Anochi, the ego, the sense of selfness that we feel that drives us to seek only our own selfish needs, is what stands between God and one's true self, the soul. How do we get past the barrier imposed by the ego self? Only by mutually nurturing relations with other human beings. You cannot do it by yourself. This is also alluded to in the pasuk, I stand, Anochi Omeid. When I stand by myself, then there's a barrier between God and man. So Pia Zetzner says, the more inflated our sense of self, the more our ego, the more our own identity, the more we care about ourselves, the harder it will be to connect to Hashem or anyone or anything around us. And the more we're able to surrender and sublimate our sense of self, then the more we'll be connected. And what's the best way to do that, he writes, not coincidentally, is to be connected with other people. Our Anochi, our sense of I, is in the way, and we have to get it out of the way. You have to get it out of the way. And he describes on the next page, creating the ideal society. The way to minimize and even dissolve this selfishness that separates you from Hashem is to seek out close friendships with like-minded spiritual seekers. To be a chevra, to join Bnei Akiva, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to be willing to blend in, to be of service. I'm in awe of Bnei Akiva, how it cultivates the people. And remember, my nieces, my nephews in Israel, who are madrichim and Bnei Akiva, they considered it, what a privilege, what a merit. When I'd ask them, how much are you getting paid? In America, you want to get somebody to work in the youth department, you got to pay them, you got to negotiate, you got to pay well. How much per hour, how much per event for them to do it. Bnei Akiva, they'd be willing to pay you for the privilege to be a madrich. It's unbelievable. To be with other people, to be a chevra who are of service, who care, who are leading one another, like-minded spiritual seekers. Each one should be as concerned about the other's welfare as his own. Share each other's worries and joys, help and guide each other on the spiritual path. Eventually, the feeling of loneliness and abandonment will disappear, and it will be easier to uproot the self-seeking from within you, from within us. This is the strategy. This is the way that we connect. To be nosei, the Simcha Chaveiro. How can we get to that level, and how can we get to that point? When we see our friends as an extension of ourselves. To form close friendships, and to share in other people's success, and not see it as taking away from or competing with our own. There's an article on page 9 from Forbes magazine that suggests this. How to be genuinely happy, not jealous when others succeed. And what's the strategy? Not coincidentally, same as our Torah's Chaim, as our Torah's Hashem, which is to connect with other people. And the author writes that she had a rival and in work, in competing and in business. And then how did she turn it around? She said, my friend Lindsay has mastered the art of being happy for other people. And she told me how she does it. Instead of thinking how someone else's success compete with hers, she focuses on how it was also hers. In other words, Lindsay takes that urge to make it all about her and make it positive. When I told her I'd published an article in a prestigious magazine, she remembered all the time she'd given me feedback on my work or helped me choose topics. She reflected on the day I'd been stressed about hunting down sources, and she patiently listened to me. She even thought about the time she helped me pick out what to wear to interview people. I knew you couldn't have accomplished what you did without me, so I got to feel proud too. Not that she said any of this to me, she just gave me heartfelt congratulations, but by thinking about it to herself, her excitement felt more genuine. She didn't have to deal with her jealous side. When we see the other as an extension of ourselves, when we blend ourselves, when we become one, then we can find the ability to be happy for other people instead of jealous. When are we jealous of someone? When they are the other. And when can we be happy for someone else? When they're part of who we are, when they're an extension of ourselves. This quality is so critical, it's so important. The last page is an article. It was an interview with a prominent mother with a best-selling book in America. A mother, a grandmother, an experienced educator, how to raise successful people. That was the title of her book and the theme of her book, How to Raise Successful Children, How to Raise Successful People. And this was an interview with her, and I was startled when I saw this interview, what she thought was the most important thing to teach her children. If you want to raise your children to be successful, what is the most important thing to teach your children to raise them to be successful? So she says, her children did not just hear her say that one must do for others, but they also saw her practicing what she preached. She feels Americans are raising their children to believe they are entitled to whatever they desire, whichever school they choose, whatever entertainment appeals to them, whatever job they think they want. Sometimes feels that America is raising a generation of narcissists. She cited studies that show that teenagers who volunteer regularly, who willingly help an elderly neighbor, who don't begrudge others' possessions, are happier and well-adjusted and are less prone to suffer from depression, addiction, or other ailments that afflict today's youth. The satisfaction that comes with doing for others is a major factor in keeping kids out of trouble. She then made a statement that made me stop short. She said that Americans do not know how to rejoice in someone else's success. In fact, she said, there isn't even an English word to describe it. My reaction to reading these words came soon enough. Every Yiddish-speaking Jew knows fargin. And even those who are not conversing in Yiddish, still know what it means to be happy when someone else is prosperous, accomplished, or doing well. And she says this is the most important thing to teach our children. If we raise God-fearing children to follow our example, contribute readily to society, we have to teach them how to be fargin, how to be happy. Not children who say, that kid got better Hanukkah presents, they got the latest video game, that kid got into the school I applied to, that kid's wearing the latest clothing. To teach our children and to be the people who exhibit and who demonstrate that capacity to be happy for other people. This is a core quality. We're living in a time that we're nosei b'olam chavero, with people who are struggling and suffering and going through a hard time, which is also an important quality, to lift their burden so it gets a little bit lighter for them. Our brothers and sisters in Israel, both suffering right under our nose in our own community, but also to develop this capacity to be joyous and happy for the people who are successful. And Amir Hashem, if we can exhibit this capacity, if we can cultivate within ourselves the ability to be happy for others, then please God, they too will share in our happiness and our success as well. Thank you so much. Right, questions?
So we had a few questions that we sent to the Rav.
Okay, sure.
Some of the halachic ones, that's okay. What's the Rav's opinion on whether we can rely on the researchers that prove modern utensils do not absorb flavors?
We recently had Rav Shechter in our community, and that question came up. And he quoted many poskim who said that it was permissible, that the laboratory tests on certain metals show that they don't absorb. But nonetheless, the consensus of poskim is to continue to treat it as we always have. So, certainly, that's his position.
Okay. Bnei Akiva, after all, so does the state of Israel play any role in the redemption process in the Rav's opinion?
Of course it does. I think it absolutely does. It's hard to deny it. Its role. There are open and revealed miracles that are not just from the 6-day war and the Yom Kippur War and the eras that precede all of us, myself included. But we're seeing miracles. The miracles of the last 15, 16 months are extraordinary. And even though the redemptive process is frustrating and it fluctuates, and we go forward and backwards, it's not linear, it's not a straight line. It's not binary. We don't go from Galus to Geula, but Geula is a process. There's an Eschalta de Geula and a Reishis Smichas. But I think it's undeniable that we're seeing, and the signs of what Chazal tell us will happen before Mashiach comes, and what the Navi promises that we'll see happen in the land are happening. So does that change anything for us right now? There's a big debate how far that goes, and schools of thought of Rav Kook and Rav Soloveitchik and different perspectives of it. Our mission, our work is the same. Our mission remains: learn Torah, live Kiddush Hashem, repair the world in Hashem's image, and hopefully merit to be able to expedite and speed up the Geula. But please God, I think we're seeing extraordinary things in our time.
Few communal. If anyone in the has any questions, please interrupt me. A few communal questions that were submitted. Rav is a big leader in using social media and digital platforms. How does the Rav recommend we can take advantage of today's world to promote and share Torah online?
Big is relative. Everything is relative. I'm a big believer. Technology, like many other gifts that Hashem gave us, can be used in two different directions, and it's up to us to imbue it with meaning and use it well. A telephone can be used to speak Lashon Hara. A telephone can be used to check in on people. A car can be used to give a good ride or go to Bikkur Cholim. A car can take you to a place of ill repute. All these technologies can be used in different directions, and it's our responsibility to regulate ourselves, to be careful, to be judicious, to have boundaries. But I think it can be used in enormous ways for good. How could the Torah world have survived Corona without technology? The ability to connect, to learn with and from and to one another. So I absolutely believe we have that opportunity. How it's implemented, each person, each community has to decide for themselves. What safeguards, what filters, what barriers, what boundaries, everybody has to decide. But I think there is enormous gift and enormous potential. I've seen it, I benefit from it in connecting with others. And I would encourage. I think it's going to even go to the next level now with AI and the direction AI is going in. AI is an enormous bracha. The productivity, the efficiency of AI. The world in 10 years from now, 5 years from now, is going to be unrecognizable to the world today. The jobs that my grandchildren will be going for don't exist today. And the jobs of today will be obsolete by my grandchildren, by your grandchildren. We don't begin to know it. AI is enormously dangerous because there is no faster and greater exporter of lies and sheker than AI. AI can create an olam hasheker, You can make any image you want of anyone, have them saying anything. You can plagiarize. I mean, it's unbelievable the sheker that can be produced through AI, but AI also can accomplish all kinds of amazing good. So technology can be used in different directions, and it's up to each individual, family, community to figure out how. But I think failure to harness it would be as colossal as failure to harness the gift of the telephone or the airplane or a car.
We combine two questions. The first one is on a communal level. What is the best way to educate, or best way of educating teens who grow up less religious or less learned and want to become Tzluma? We're going to connect to that a different question that's here also. Often people at that level and stage are just taught maybe Avot, some Chumash, not much more than that. What would the Rabbi recommend to someone who needs to give a shiur or chavura to these kind of kids to get them a bit closer and to them up?
I think the best thing is to speak right. First of all, everybody learns what they feel connected to, and some people will feel connected to Pirkei Avos, and some to Navi, and some to Chumash, and some to Gemara, and some to Halacha, and some to Machshava. But if you ask me the language, I think today people, they want to be spoken to their neshama, to connect to their purpose, their meaning, to the why of why we're here, to understand our mission, what life is all about. And so there's a lot of learning that we do that's detailed, there's a lot of information, but the wisdom that speaks to why do we wake up this morning? Why are we still here? What's our mission? What's our purpose? And I mean that as individually, I mean it collectively as Klal Yisrael, the why. So I think that the Torah as this blueprint for creation, this instruction manual for navigating life. The world we're living in is filled with noise and a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos and a lot of corruption and a lot of unhappiness. The Torah has a lot of wisdom and tools to navigate that world, to turn on the light in that darkness. And that's the gift and the possibility that we have. So whether it's particular texts to do that, or whether it's experientially living a Judaism that exposes that, and experiences that speak to and touch the neshama. To touch the neshama, I think, is the direction I would go.
Okay, one more question that's also connected to that. When I was in Madrid on the summer camp, I found myself faced with the dilemma of choosing between trying to interest the uninterested Chanikim and giving enough time to those who are already engaging to allow them to grow too. So in a broader setting, how in Rav's opinion, how should we approach this conflict when time or resources are limited?
That's a great question. That's a good question. I don't think you can write off those who aren't interested, because you can't ever write off any Jew. You have to love, and you have to try, and you have to connect. But I do think that sometimes there's diminishing returns. And sometimes you have to not cut your losses, but to pour more limited resources where it's going to be much harder versus the person who's inspired and excited, and you're going to elevate them, empower them, and through them connect to countless more people. So I don't think it's all or nothing. I don't think you can write off the people who are less interested, but are the people less interested because they're sort of apathetic and different, but they could be inspired, or they're anti, they're against, they're cynical, and they're turned off. If they're cynical and turned off, again, don't write them off. Leave the door open, create the connection, the invitation. But I think it's going to take a lot more effort to get a lot less done than pouring it into somebody who's excited for the influence and can take that and pay it forward to many more people.
I think you mean people who grew up from. The question was whether people who grew up in Bnei Akiva has a wide spectrum. People might come from far-flung communities, right, and they haven't grown up with anything. They don't know anything. They might be enthusiastic to learn, but zero.
So being Makar of somebody who comes from nothing versus... We'll make it that now.
The person who wrote the question wants to explain, but I think for the question, from the way the question was phrased, it's just not talking about religious levels, rather about levels of engagement.
Yeah, I think it's all the above. Malacha Maruba. You can't write anybody off. We have to work with all the populations. Retention is very important. So sometimes we're in such an effort to do kiruv, to do outreach, and to inspire others, and we fail to retain the people who grew up in it and who have the education. So in the world of sales, there's a cost of acquisition to get a new customer, and it's a lot less money to retain a customer. But they yield the same thing, whether it's a customer who's ordering again or a new customer ordering for the first time. So we need to do retention. We put a lot of effort and focus onto retention, inspiring kiruv krovim, inreach, and not only outreach at the expense of the inreach. We need to do both.
I have 2 or 3 last ideological questions. If anyone else has questions from the floor, first.
Okay, two more. Let's do it.
Okay, if not, I'm going to go with what I have already here. So, I have to pick two out of the ones that are left. So, in the Rav's opinion, should rabbis express their opinion on political matters?
Absolutely not. I don't believe rabbis should. No, it depends what you mean by that. I don't think rabbis should endorse candidates, politicians, parties, but I think rabbis can talk about issues and what are the issues that should matter and why the Torah and what the Torah feels about those issues, and people will infer from it what they want, but not directly. I don't think rabbis should weigh in politics.
Following that question, as a Jew, a rabbi living in the United States, what are the Rav's greatest hopes or fears for the upcoming presidency of Trump?
Okay, it's a steer from the last question, but I'm very optimistic for the next 4 years. I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic if President Trump can focus not on revenge or not on people, but on policies. I think his policies, for the most part, are very aligned with ours. And I make certain assumptions when I say ours, but wholesale ours. And I think in America, we learned from this election and maybe the last few that unfortunately, we're not choosing among people whose character we admire or would want to emulate or is consistent or conforms with ours. Unfortunately, we forfeited that on both sides. We're looking for whose policies come closest. And we should be conscious in how we talk about our leaders, not to deify them or admire them or hold them up, but to see them with their failures and be grateful for when their policies align and support them for the policies that do align. I think that his policies very much align. I'm very hopeful about them. I think his appointments, which he has maybe the most diverse cabinet in a very, very long time in America, including some former Democrats, including non-politicians, including people who were his political enemies, and he formed a cabinet among them. Like Abraham Lincoln had a cabinet of his opponents. And so I'm very hopeful, but cautiously optimistic. In the end of the day, when the candidate we hope for loses, we shouldn't be too pessimistic. When he wins, we shouldn't be too optimistic, because it's all in the hands of Hashem how it unfolds. So I'm hopeful, but very, very cautious.
We have 1 minute left. On a question on WhatsApp. How should we balance the relationship with a chanich? More as a chanich or more as a friendship?
Both. I think that there needs to be, we live in a generation, there used to be authority figures were authority figures, there was some healthy distance, there need to be boundaries, obviously of appropriateness and of modesty and care in those ways. But I think, it's sort of based on the shir that we had, and v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and creating this notion that the other is an extension of myself. There's a genuine friendship. You're not a statistic, you're not a data point, you're not a notch in my belt, you're not just one of my, but you're so there should be a friendship. If we're defining friendship as love and loyalty and extension of ourselves, that's how we should feel towards all Jews, and certainly those we're interacting with as well, but with healthy boundaries and an understanding that it's not a pure friendship of peers, it's a different relationship that has an element of friendship in it. That's what I would say. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's wonderful to be together. I wish everyone a lot of hatzlacha.